try to unmute. I've decided I'm not waiting for the whole thing for that to finish because we got started a little late. I was talking to my guest in the green room prior to going live here, and I looked up what time it was. I was like, "Oh man, we should be like live right now." And so we go ahead and kicked it off. Welcome, you guys, to Cyber Social Hub's Hubcast. My name's Kevin DeLong. I'm the founder of Cyber Social Hub. If you are not a member of Cyber Social Hub, I'm going to give you that opportunity here in just a minute. And if you didn't notice, we are actually in a new platform. Well, if you're watching on YouTube or Twitter, X, whatever, you don't even notice some of the differences, except maybe some of the graphics are a little different. But we're in a full back end. So if you watched last week, I kind of screwed that up pretty good with just the way the scenes transitioned and whatnot. Again, average person wouldn't notice, but finicky me notices these types of things. So if you got a second, make sure you guys say hi in the chat. We can bring live chat up onto the screen, which I'll do so here in just a little bit. But first and foremost, I got to flip over here and talk to you about our sponsor who is bringing you this today. It is Virtual Forensic Computing. Now, we've had these guys on the Hubcast before. I think they've done some webinars. If you remember, I think it was Tom played the ukulele on the Hubcast. So that was a lot of fun. But if you've ever wondered about virtual machines and how to utilize them in your forensic investigation, they have an online course now that you guys can take if you're interested in it. It's going to provide you all that training that you're going to need to really identify and focus on the relevant digital evidence from the computer system that you're taking a peek at. You're going to look and learn how to basically create, configure the virtual environment, because that's probably one of the most challenging things, or what I personally had struggles with, was that there. And then it's going to take a look into some different operating systems, Windows, Linux, and how you can virtualize these without altering the data. Obviously, that's one of the most important things, right? We don't want to change data. So you can learn how to streamline that investigation, and it's going to save you a lot of time. Say maybe that's not the machine you're looking for, or that evidence or information is just kind of jumping right out at you. You're going to be able to do it in the digital crime scene just in seconds. I mean, it's going to be quick for you. So if you get a chance and you're more interested visit vfc.uk.com. It's right there. You can scan that too. But visit, it's called vfc.uk.com/training and enroll today. Or you can use that QR code there. Just take your smartphone out, hit it, and it'll drive you right to that page. So with that being said, I want to tell you a little bit about Cyber Social Hub. If you're not familiar with Cyber Social Hub, you should be, because you're hanging out here on the channel. And we give you free memberships. It's free. Everything we do, we try to keep free. Obviously, it's sometimes challenging, but thank goodness to all the sponsors on the channel, like VFC and my guests coming up, that help keep everything free for you guys, so we can give you the latest and greatest stuff. So what Cyber Social Hub is, again, just a community of digital investigators. You can go in there. If you got a question, ask a question. Somebody hopefully will get in there and answer it. If not, I'll personally try to find the answer for you, or at least somebody that can answer it, and make sure you get your problem solved out there. So awesome. Join up if you haven't yet. So what I'm going to do is, hey, there we go, pop up some chat there on the screen. So we're in Restream right now, and I'm kind of testing out some different platforms. We're with Ecamm, and I was having some bandwidth issues here at the house, and so Ecamm was causing me a little grief. So it caused me to reach out and to look for other sources. Restream, a little bit better, because how the old system works, so you guys knew, is everyone would connect to me here, and then I would then broadcast out to all of the social networks, right? Obviously, that takes a lot of bandwidth to do when you're doing it from a single point. That's how Ecamm was functioning. And, obviously, when I have bad internet days, or obviously the kids are home from school, they're streaming internet like insane. So we need to find a better solution. Restream is what we're using now. That way, everybody dials into Restream, and then Restream just pushes it out to all the networks that you guys are seeing, because we're broadcasting out to Hang on, I can see the whole list right now. Yeah, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, and it says +1. I don't know. I can't see the other one. It's hidden, but there's one other that we're pushing out to, and I just don't know what it is off the top of my head. But we can bring chat up onto the screen and make it a little bit more interactive. So, hey, Bob, and hey, Megan, I can see you guys are also here as well. So, without further ado, I'm going to switch this over. And again, if you watched last week's episode, you'll know that I really am a little uncomfortable with these buttons. So I'm going to do my darndest here to bring our guest up right now. And it is Matt Danner. And hey, I did it. Yay! From Monolith Forensics. Hey, Matt, how are you?
Hey, good. Doing well.
Good. Excellent. So I can even individually adjust volumes on here between the multiple users. I'm really happy. That's awesome. Now you should be able to see the chat too, right? You have a chat button. You have a private chat down at the bottom somewhere. That's just me. If we want to
private chat. Yeah. And I see there's a chat window on the right here.
Yeah. So if you click that one, you'll be able to see, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all the chats that happen out in there too.
Honestly, I mean, I guess does this aggregate all the messages from those different platforms? Does it tell me?
It aggregates them all. It's just you can kind of see them on. We used to use Ecamm too. This makes it a little bit easier, and we can even pop them up on the screen here. We'll bring Bob up here. There's Bob.
Oh, nice.
So you can bring him up and then hide him again like that. So yeah, it's a pretty cool little platform. For sure. It's easy because it's all web based. That means like Ecamm's Mac only, and it's software you have to download, which means my team can't get in and help me set it up if I'm busy doing something else. This one allows teams to come in and set everything up, and then I just show up and talk. But at least until I decide what I'm going to do, I'm so sold on Ecamm. I still love it. This doesn't do the things that Ecamm can.
Yeah, I'm not a streamer, so I don't know what the tech is or the current state of things are. So
yeah, it's easy. That's why I like it, because it's easy. Makes it simple. But anyway, we have a check-in that we're supposed to be doing, right? Because we're past midway through the year. And we did a show, I think it was the very first one in January that we did this year, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. And we did basically a predictions show of what we saw coming in digital investigations, right?
Yeah.
And, we try to hold ourselves accountable here. We're going to do a mid, and then we'll do an end as well. But we're going to check in with some of the mid stuff and see how we predicted. So what I'm looking at now is I'm trying to pull up and some of the show notes from last year and see what we managed to do here. Hang on one second. I'm trying to pull all this stuff up. So it's really just a check-in, and I'm kind of curious of if anyone else had any predictions as well. We'll open that up here in just a minute as I'm digging through this mess. All right, I gotta get off of this screen. I'm trying to learn how to do all this stuff, and it's not working out real well for me. There we go. All right. There are some show notes here, and I'll help you out with some of the show notes. I'll go for. Well, we had one that was the same. And it was kind of the glaring one, the big one out there, which was, of course, I think people have been talking about for a long time, was AI, right?
Yeah, I think we had the same prediction, but I think mine was a little bit more. Mine was a little bit more cynical than yours. Mine was like, people will claim to have AI in their forensic tools.
That's right. It was now that you mention it. I tried to watch the show this morning a little bit I honestly didn't remember anything that I said.
Yeah. I remembered that one very well because I just knew, I I already saw it happening with companies that aren't in the forensic space, because of it's not quite as bad now, but at the time it was just kind of, in the software space and the sort of venture capital space, that's all that anybody cared about or wanted to talk about was what are you doing with AI? What's
Yeah.
your platform doing with AI? And it's like, it doesn't matter if you just, I don't know, generate random strings or random numbers. Companies just need to say they have AI. So,
Right.
and there's, a little bit of I think it's better now. I think people better understand this type of AI that we have now. But at the time, people didn't understand that, these are natural language processing models. These aren't little Einsteins in a box. You know what I mean? It's a specific type of AI that's good at natural language processing, which has a lot of really good applications, but also means there's some limitations to it, to where it's not an all-around general artificial intelligence system.
Right.
So because of that misunderstanding first half of the year, it's sort of like everybody has to like claim they have it just from marketing and sort of branding purposes.
Yep. Yeah, I think you hit it on the head with that. I even hate to use. I think I'm a little more cynical just from our conversation last time, because it's not even AI really.
Well, we have to accept that the definition has changed. So
I
AI is now the colloquial name for anything that's sort of any process or engine that's capable of conducting more complicated tasks without specific instruction sets, I guess is a good way to think about it. So you can just use any system where you can tell it to do something in English and then it can execute that task.
Yeah.
Is what we're classifying as AI now. That's why now you have the term of AGI is now becoming the new version of what we used to think AI was, which is artificial general intelligence.
Gosh, I had not heard that term before.
Yeah, so AGI is AGI, artificial general intelligence. So that now refers to Data from Star Trek, right?
Right, gotcha.
It used to be AI was just AI meant Data from Star Trek. Now AI means large language models, which is natural language processing. AGI is now what they've coined the term for something closer like to Data from Star Trek. Also, there's also artificial superintelligence. I've heard that being tossed around recently as well.
Oh my gosh.
Artificial superintelligence is also another term because they're trying to rebrand so that people understand there's a difference between what ChatGPT is doing and what Data from Star Trek is doing, right?
Right. I heard go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So because AI has just become a marketing term now that everybody's colloquially using to describe these systems. So they're trying to make sure people understand there's a difference between that and the AI, the Terminators from Terminator 1 and 2 or whatever. Or Skynet, I guess.
Yeah. 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 Who was it that said, I can't remember. I was watching, and somebody in the audience, I'm sure will know, or you might even know, is I was sitting and kind of flipping through, what do they call it? Doom scrolling, basically, through social. And I was searching for AI stuff specifically, and I can't remember who said it, but they said something about AI is definitely not AI. If you tell AI to write a Western movie or a script, right? It's going to be able to do that, right? You say, hey, you can use 5 different characters, tell a little bit about each character, and then it will go off and write it. But they said, by no means is this any type of intelligence. What it does is reads it's just fast, right? And has access to a large data set of what we call the internet. It can compare all of the references to this and then build a script based off of everyone else's work. It's a
little bit, and I don't want to go too in the weeds. I don't claim to be an AI expert, but I'm a digital forensics expert. I am an engineer, so I do understand some of this, but it does what you're saying, but there's another layer to it though, which is what these LLMs are doing. It's using predictive analysis to produce an output. So when you give it a prompt, you give it that prompt of write a script about a Western movie.
Mm-hmm.
What it's doing is it's taking that language, putting it through a prediction model, a sort of decoder, and predicting what the most likely output from that data is.
Hmm.
So what it can do, and it's hard for us to understand as human beings because it's basing that prediction model, it's basing those predictions off of a model that has trillions of bits of data in it, right? So it has this model with all of this data, and it's using all of that data to define a prediction, a probability distribution on what you've just prompted it. So if you ask it, hey, write a script that's about some kind of Western movie. Well, it has all of this base of English language to base its predictions on, and it just takes each of those words and phrases and spits out what it thinks the most likely distribution of words is related to what you just gave it. And that ends up being, and that's part of these, when you see GPT 1, 2, 3, 4 coming out, what they're doing is they're just creating bigger and more fine-tuned models that get better and better at those predictions. So that's effectively what it's doing. It's just basically a giant probability distribution that's running on a lot of really expensive hardware that's pre-trained to understand what those probabilities are, and then it's outputting a result. So a way that I try to tell people about the difference between like LLMs and artificial intelligence is you're thinking as a human, when you play around with ChatGPT, you're thinking about whether it's sentient or not. ChatGPT is not thinking about whether you are sentient or not, right? There's no thinking there that's happening, right? That's when, to me, that's when we cross into the boundary of we have now true artificial intelligence where the AI you're talking to is also thinking about what you're thinking, right? Because now it's like there's some other thing going on in the background that you're not seeing because it's doing its own thinking and processing just by interacting with you. Whereas with these systems, they're not doing that. You're just giving them an input and they're spitting out an output that's based on some set of parameters that we've designed, whether it be probability distributions, models, these AI models, or something else, or even if it's just a simple Python script that we write, right? If I write a script, for that Python script to work, I have to give it some kind of input, and then it returns some kind of output. There is no thinking process involved before or after that process or that exchange.
Nope. Spot on. Hang on a second. I got Amber throwing some stuff in. So AI is being actually banned from forensic tools in certain countries. I was not aware of that. That's an interesting fact.
If that's true, I mean, is that like banned from like the tool cannot be engineered to have artificial intelligence?
I'm not sure. So we'll have to do the whole 15-second wait because we're living in the future about 15 seconds.
That's right. I would say it's pretty short-sighted. If that's the case, if they're just banning the tech from being used in forensic tools at all, I think that's pretty short-sighted.
Yeah.
Because the purpose of an AI tool in something like forensics is not to generate conclusions for you, but it's just to help you go through data, right? It's just to help you sift through a billion points of data that you're looking at. So for example, you could theoretically see a future where you pass in, let's say you have a Windows computer. We know from forensics, there's just certain things we care about when we're doing forensic analysis of a Windows system.
Mm-hmm.
Theoretically feed choose the forensic artifacts we want, process them in a certain way that it can be fed to an AI, and then we can essentially chat with those forensic artifacts through the AI and say, hey, do you see any evidence? Do you see any instances of USB devices being used? And within seconds, the AI could theoretically give you an answer, say, yeah, I see the following instances. And if you set it up right, you can even set it up to where it gives you an answer and then gives you the references so that you can it can tell you, yeah, I see 3 instances of USB device being used. Here are the locations where I found that. And you click into the locations and actually examine it yourself. So there's things like that where AI can be a very useful application in forensics at some point. But, this idea that you're going to walk into court with a report generated by an AI that you're then just regurgitating. I mean, I would argue that a lot of examiners are doing that anyway.
Right.
Just using Magnet and Celebrite and other tools where they look at the data themselves. They just generate a report and walk into court with it. So if we're banning AI in tools like this, I mean, I think we should ban examiners from walking into court and just regurgitating a forensic report also. I mean, it's the same thing. There's not really a difference there. So it's all about.
I actually agree very much with that. We've gone off on long tangents, I think, on that on that very subject before. Whether it's been on a Hubcast or not, I don't know, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about, so in a weird way, I could argue where I agree not having the AI tools, because then it's just going to breed a new generation of people not doing their work anymore, not doing the forensic work. But at the same time, I'm also like someone like me, I could see a lot of really useful applications for having AI-based assistance in work looking at forensic data, which is what a lot of companies, that's what they're trying to build AI models to do. They're not using it in a forensic context, but they're using it in other contexts that are similar, right? Like, how do you look at business intelligence? How do you, can we use AI models to help us understand customer model better, or customer attitudes or impressions, or can we use it to look at our business data and see if there's gaps in our revenue or gaps in our sales process, things like that we're going to use AI to assist us, because that AI can look at that data and churn it a lot faster than we can as a data analyst or financial advisor or whatever.
Yeah, no, for sure. Spot on. And I just realized, Matt, I just didn't introduce you at all. We just went right in to the.
I think you did.
I said of Monolith, right?
Yeah.
I guess what I wanted to let people know is what your company does a little bit before we get too deep into now we're 20 minutes in.
I'm the owner and founder of Monolith Forensics. What we do is we build software that's sort of like, it's, the traditional term for it would be case management for digital forensics, but I try not to use that phrase too much, because what we're really working on is, case management is basically, a lot of case management can theoretically be done in a spreadsheet, which is what most people tend to use. So we try to do things that a spreadsheet can't do. We add dimensions to what you're doing in the forensic lab in terms of how you're tracking things, how you're collaborating with team, your colleagues, giving you a place to take your notes, giving you a place to, if you do a good job and put data into Monolith, you have the reward of spitting out a nice case report that has everything in it for you. So we're really working on a productivity tool or an operating system for the forensic lab, for both, traditional forensic teams, for e-discovery teams, and also for incident response teams in different cybersecurity contexts. So that's where, and I'm currently the lead engineer. We have a couple of engineers on staff, and I kind of lead that team. So that's where, if you're curious where if you're asking yourself, where does this guy get off talking about AI? It's because, that's because that's 80% of my job is engineering our platform and looking at these different technologies and systems to see how they can be useful to us as a software company.
Yeah, that's why I kind of want to give some context behind that. It's like Matt kind of knows what he's talking about. Kevin, you don't listen to me at all, because I'm just like, I speculate and I just stir the pot. That's my sole role in life, is to stir the pot, get people fired up. If you want to learn more about Matt's company, it's over there somewhere, the QR code. I think it's going to take you to his website and not some nefarious site. You can trust us perfectly fine to do that. So anyway, yeah, thanks for that. I wanted to make sure that I was bringing that up in there, and I'm looking at chat to see if anything else was coming in there. Parabin says it's probably Amber. I'm guessing it's Amber behind the Parabin thing.
Well, she brings up another good point, because she's mentioning it's probably related to privacy issues, which makes a lot of sense, because right now the only effective way to use AI right now is through third-party, companies like OpenAI or Microsoft or Facebook and Meta. And that presents, especially for us in our realm, that presents a real challenge for us if we're in law enforcement or government, or even if you're a cybersecurity company or whatever, you're dealing with client data, and it's not clear to you whether you should use these third-party AI systems to help in your process. So what's interesting about that is it kind of ties into one of the other, claims that I made at the beginning of the year, which was we're going to see an increase in, more open source tooling. And well, I do think that's somewhat true to forensics. If you look at the AI landscape right now, just yesterday, Facebook released Llama 3.1, which is a really impressive open source project where you're not familiar with Llama 3. Llama 3 is Facebook's AI model that they fully open sourced. So they have Meta AI, which is their cloud competitor to ChatGPT. But the models that Meta AI is based on have been open sourced by Facebook. So you can actually download and run these models locally if you want. The downside, though, is that things like Llama 3.1 is just the next iteration of it, where the models are just more finely tuned and better. But they released a 403 billion parameter version of Llama 3. So to give you context, the previous Llama 3 model had 70 billion parameters. So basically the parameter size is a sort of description of the model space, like how many pieces of information is this model trained on, and can use to generate responses to natural language processing requests. And the fun part about that is that it's open source, but really you need to properly run that 403 billion parameter model. You probably need like a $50,000 server rig to properly run it, because it requires the way these models work is those parameters have to be loaded in memory in order to get any kind of response at any decent rate.
Really?
So, yeah. So if I'm running that model locally, and I ask it a request like I asked ChatGPT, if I want to get a request back that's sort of simultaneous, has a latency of a second or two, I need to run that model in a fast operating space, which is basically memory. So in order to run something like that 403 billion parameter version of Llama, you need something like a terabyte of RAM, and then something like 800 gigabytes of virtual memory, which would be running on GPUs. So you need like a significantly, extremely powerful server or workstation to run it. It would probably have multiple, linked GPUs that can handle the processing tasks required for Llama to effectively utilize the parameters in that model. But having said that, they have a version that's an 8 billion parameter model that can run on your laptop pretty easily.
Wow.
But it's a lot less accurate because it's not trained on as much data.
Right.
But the point is, though, I think this is where the future of open source and artificial intelligence is going, is that before long, probably within a year, you'll have fairly small and efficient models that'll be incredibly good at natural language processing tasks, that can just run on a standard laptop or even on your phone. So what that's going to lead to is lots of open source projects that leverage these more efficient LLMs that can just do a whole bunch of crazy stuff. And if you're smart, you know how to utilize these models, you can build some really cool stuff. So imagine, for example, you could build, if you do a lot of smartphone processing, and let's say you're working in law enforcement, and you get a case from a detective that's on a homicide case or whatever, or maybe a narcotics case or whatever. And the detective's like, hey, I want to know, I want to see all messages related to guns, drugs, or assault of some kind. You can process that text message data and create something that's called an embedding, where you use a large language model to create embeddings for the text message data, store it in something else called a vector database, and then write a fairly simple tool that uses an LLM to allow you to effectively chat with the text messages on the phone. So when you process it, you can then ask the LLM, hey, do you see any messages related to gun violence or guns? And what it can do is effectively run what we call a semantic search, meaning it doesn't do a keyword search. It doesn't search for the word gun. It's smart enough to understand, even if you don't use the word gun, but you're talking about guns, you use you use something like the word Glock, or you use something like rifle, or you're just talking about shooting someone. The language model is smart enough to understand the colloquialism and the phrases being used, and it can show you, yeah, I found 16 instances where these chat messages contain conversations related to guns. And I've seen sort of the way that this sort of application can be set up, and it's really simple, and it's going to get even easier as these models get more efficient and become smaller. These are going to be incredibly easy applications to build. That's the sort of thing I kind of expect for these forensic tools to eventually have, but maybe with what Amber's saying, if it's not allowed, then that could put a hamper on things. That could, let's say the European Union puts a ban on it, that would, potentially chill Magnet or Cellbrite or some of those companies from putting it in, or maybe they find a way to feature flag it, make it sure it's only available in the States, not available in the EU or something.
Sure.
But you won't have to rely on those companies. I mean, we could internally build that as a free tool if we wanted to, if we had the time and resources. It's not that crazy difficult. There's tons of open source developers in the forensic community that could build that as well. So it's not crazy. It's not as crazy as the thing as it sounds to just build it independently.
A ton. And Mohammed is asking about leveraging AI for enhance. I think it was a response to what Amber's question was originally. My thoughts on it, and again, we're kind of revisiting our original predictions from back in January, but this is a great thing. Is that's really how I personally see AI as being utilized, is to help kind of narrow down. It's like, hey, you asked to find pieces of evidence related to this or evidence related to this. Try looking at these things first, and then it's going to help you quickly identify potential. But then it's up to you as the examiner. Okay, now let's do the investigation. It identified what I'm looking for. Now I need to do the how did it get there? When did it get there? Put a body at the keyboard type of things. Mohammed, what you're asking, I personally don't see anything wrong with that in a tool. But again, we're relying on governments and whatever someone tells the government official as to what AI is bad, right? That they may go, oh yeah, it could do this. We don't want that. I mean, again, you kind of got to refer back to the individual country on it and how it got there in the first place. I'm going to spring chat up on the screen because there's a couple of them here. Let me pull these up. There we go.
And that's generally the problem with new tech. Especially new transformational tech that, something like these large language models, it's such a huge leap in what people were accustomed to seeing from AI, right? We effectively in 1 year went from, I would even argue within 1 month, we went from AI as a fantasy to people on the street now see what they think is like Skynet operating on the internet, right? So when things like that happen, you just have this natural human response of fear of the unknown, and people don't understand how these things work, so they immediately jump to, we have to. I mean, think about the first few months when ChatGPT came out. Think about how many people, what I would consider to be grifters, came out and were like, "This is the end. This is the end of the world. We're about to like witness, the singularity and humanity's done with, right?" And those people were literally just, this happens every time something like this. There's people that come out of the woodwork to profit off of the fear people have, when clearly that hasn't happened. These large language models just aren't capable of the sort of Skynet level stuff that people were worried about. But unfortunately, for the way humans work, it's just hard to overcome that level of fear. And there has to be, anytime quick advances like this happen, that's what you're going to see, is that it just takes time for people to adjust and get used to having this type of technology around and realizing that, okay, this isn't as bad as we thought it was. Ideally, our government officials will be smart enough to be able to understand that and make good decisions about it, but a lot of times they're not, especially considering here in the States, most of our government are populated like 70-year-old plus people that don't know how technology works in the first place. So that can cause some issues,
and they're all on Facebook posting memes. Yeah,
of course. But yeah, I think, I mean, I think, like I said earlier, the way to look at AI in relation to forensics is it's no different than all the other tools that we're using, right? If you're just doing your analysis and fully dependent on the forensic tool that you're using, and you're not doing any kind of validation of your conclusions or findings, if you're not capable of manually investigating a forensic artifact that you found that a tool has reported to you, then you're not really doing forensics anyway. You're not doing the forensics. The engineers at whatever your software vendor is are doing the forensics. You're just relying and hoping the engineers did their jobs correctly, which we've seen multiple cases in real life where that's been a disaster. So, and there's no difference with AI. If you use AI in your forensic analysis, it doesn't matter if that's what you do. If you tell your forensic ChatGPT, hey, do my analysis for me and write a report, and then you just walk into court with that report, then yeah. It's like, what do we need you for? We'll just put the AI in court and let it do its thing, right? So that's my perspective, at least. So
yeah, no, my thoughts too, pretty spot on. I mean, obviously you have a more in-depth understanding of it than I do, but if we look back at the original prediction of more AI, of course, you were the cynical side of it, is that I think I've failed so far. I don't think it's where I thought it would be by now, or at least companies haven't released as much. I mean, there's some out there. Don't get me wrong. There's some companies out there attempting to do it. But I'm thinking, something a little bit more. Man, what's that? What's that crazy show that Tom Cruise was in where it could predict?
Minority Report.
Yes, Minority Report, where something at least maybe not predict like someone's behaviors, but I mean, crime and I wonder if it's possible. Again, I'm going off a side tangent here to, train a model of AI based on an individual's data set itself to predict certain behaviors that may or may not occur.
Well, if you think about how I just explained something like ChatGPT works,
that's why it just popped.
What's really scary about it, not from a destructive point of view, but from just thinking about it as existentially as a human being. All we did with ChatGPT is we just fed it a bunch of English. We just gave it a bunch of stuff that we say, and it was able to create a probability model to say you can give it any other word and it can guess what the response is supposed to be. So think about what that says about our language and our capabilities of communicating with each other. It means the things that we say to each other are predictable, right? So what does that mean? That means that if you had a large enough model, a large enough compute resources, a large enough, the capacity computationally to process information, you could collect data from a person's life, or you could collect data from thousands or hundreds or millions of people, put it into a giant model like this, process all of it, and then suddenly you have a ChatGPT model that can predict the future of any particular person, right? You can say, what is this? Here's a person that does the following things on a regular basis. What are they going to do tomorrow? And then this ChatGPT thing, precog from Minority Report, can look at the time of year, look at events that are happening now, look at where does the person live, what are the demographics of the person, and they could probably accurately predict almost everything they're going to do tomorrow, right, as a human being, and maybe even predict even further than that.
That would be interesting.
I'm kind of talking out of my rear end about this, but I'm just saying,
I like it.
Actually, if you had a computational system that's capable of processing trillions upon trillions upon trillions of data points to generate a predictive model of human behavior, you might actually be able to create a ChatGPT version that you can just tell it some things about a person that can predict what the next year of their life is going to look like.
Yeah. I mean, just imagine someone's like social feeds included into their, the Seiz systems, be it desktop, laptop, mobile, and then pull all the other physical, the stuff that's not typically online, like even though you can pull address, stuff like that. If they can determine, do they have the accounts, if they can go out and find accounts that they typically subscribe to, that's scary. Someone's probably, I'm sure the government has this model already.
Well, to be honest, if you think the reason it's sort of an existential weird issue is because none of us are chaotic in our lives. Like, we don't choose to do things randomly from one day to the next.
Right.
So what that means is that your life can be broken down into an algorithm that a thing like ChatGPT can just kind of basically predict what you're going to do for the next 30 days, right?
Yeah. No, that's fact. People are going to know I drink coffee every morning at a certain time and what order I put cream and then the sometimes flavored syrup. Yeah, and it's scary, the stuff that I do just out of habit.
We all like to think we're the main character of our own stories, and we do all these unique, great, wonderful things. But really, we live in the same part of the world. We live in the same culture. We all pretty much do the same stuff every day.
Yep, without a doubt.
It's sort of a weird, kind of makes you think like maybe I should do more random stuff from one day to the next, just to throw off the algorithms.
Right, for sure, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm going to admit my own failure in the AI thing. I really thought there'd be some more developments in true AI. People are just they're using it as a marketing term, I think what you're referring to, than anything else. It's not true AI. It's what the tools have been doing forever and ever. They just slapped an AI label on it and maybe a different way of presenting it. to it. It's not a true set. A true set is making what we were just talking about. I think is making it the data set itself seized the model where it can actually learn from all of that data. And then it'd be able to say, hey, this joker was doing this over here. What? Wait, what? And you can go and find all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, because I think AI can be a real, if we use it right and we build it right, especially in a forensic context, it can be super useful because it can just make it to where, as a human being, you're just looking through a bunch of raw data and you're capable of missing things, right? Whereas in AI, it's trained on the data that you're trying to look at, right? So if you set it up properly, you can just ask it questions. You can literally, chat. You can set up an AI where theoretically you can chat with a computer like it's a person. Feed it forensic data from a computer and talk to the computer like you're talking with the dead, like you're a medium or something,
right?
To the computer instead of a dead person. And by doing that, you can say, hey, did anyone ever plug, like, where did the bad guy insert the USB drive? Like, has anyone ever connected a thumb drive to you? Has anyone ever tried to upload data to the internet from you? Has anyone ever tried to delete data from you or whatever? And suddenly it can just talk to you and give you responses and say, yeah, there was this one user who deleted a bunch of stuff from me on January 12th. It's like, cool, show me where you're seeing that. Show me that. And then you just
that now, my friend, is AI and how it should work. not this like, hey, go do that, and
well, isn't that cool though? Like, you could almost treat the computer like a witness,
yeah.
like, and
I can
just
see it now.
yeah.
So I got some man. Where is Alexis Bergoni when we need him? We could make some awesome memes out of that whole, sitting the old beige laptop setting up on the stand testifying, or the old beige box with the big CRT monitors.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. So let me look back at my notes here too. So AI, obviously we've been talking about that one for a little while. You mentioned the rise in open source. Where do you think that's at right now? We're 7 months into the year.
I think it's about the same. I think with open source, in forensics specifically, I think I haven't seen a whole lot of new open source tools pop up. But I do hear, generally I hear more people talking about it and more people just generally trying to build their own tools. Mostly because from my perspective, what I'm seeing is, and this is why I made this prediction, is because they're feeling pressure from rising prices of forensic software. But more importantly, what we're seeing is forensic software is getting more expensive and the value isn't matching with the expense in a lot of cases, or at least those companies might claim they are, but from when you talk to customers, a lot of customers just aren't feeling the value that they're getting for the increased costs. So what you're just seeing is a natural pressure of people looking for alternatives. They're looking for other ways to do things. So that's going to go in a lot of different places. Sometimes it's, are there other tools out there we can buy? Sometimes it's, do we even need to do this process anymore? And sometimes it's usually the young nerdy guy that's trying to make their mark in the world, or a young woman who's like, you know what, I think I can build this myself.
Yeah.
And they do the research to actually build a tool where they just build something on their own that solves some problem they have that they don't have to spend thousands of dollars on anymore. I think that's sort of the general trend that we're going to start seeing, especially considering, just like in the programming world, nobody owns any of this data, right? So the data that you look on a hard drive, it's like nobody can keep you from reverse engineering it or looking at it. So because of that, it makes it to where anybody with programming knowledge can write their own solutions or build their own solutions to some of these analytical problems in forensics. It's just a matter of, who in our community has the sort of fortitude and the will to actually work on these problems and make them available to the rest of the community.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see, and I know I didn't ask this for the first one, and I didn't realize we could see chats come in from LinkedIn. This is the first time I've ever seen a chat pop in from LinkedIn on this system, which is cool. Of course, it means he basically said, "Hey, The video connection is not stable, but the chat works, man. Look at that. That's the very first LinkedIn chat I've ever seen come in on the show. So that's pretty cool. But people in the audience, first question would be just say, if you're using quote unquote, again, I'm using this very loosely, of what a vendor has marketed to you, like an AI in your investigations, or what we're just talking about with open source tools. I'd be interested to see, just the comments in there. You could just type like open source yes or AI yes into the chat. I'd be curious to see if you guys are all using it or have used it, or what a vendor's kind of label it as AI, into the chat. Give us an idea of whether that's going anywhere or not. I have a good idea that the chat's going to stay pretty stagnant of where it's at the moment, but I got to remember that we're 15 seconds into the future too. So they're just now hearing what I said.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Let me pop back to the show notes while we wait for some of those things to come in. So I mentioned then, and this one is a colossal failure, unless I just haven't heard anything on it. I did a quick search for this prior to the show earlier this morning. I was prepping for the show, and I mentioned some of the virtual gaming, not VR to be clear, but if you remember, I talked about GeForce Now, which I still play to this day, and then Amazon. I think they still have Luna. I haven't checked to see if it's still around. I'm guessing it's still around. Where obviously I'm on a Mac, right? If anyone ever has tried gaming on a Mac, God bless you, number one. And then near it's impossible, right? Because everything's just written for Windows and or PlayStation, right? Get a console. And man, I like the layout of. I'm an old school PC gamer, and I like to go and play like that with the mouse and everything else. PlayStation had something interesting a few years ago. Well, with PlayStation, oh crime, not more than a few years ago now. It's a PlayStation 3. It had controllers based off of people who are transitioning from PC to bring them over, which was awesome. I loved it. But I just wanted to keep using those types of controllers. But anyway, the VR gaming, they're virtual, right? Which means the game, the chat, nothing lives on my system because I'm streaming essentially the controls to my mouse and everything quickly back to, GeForce's Now or Amazon's Luna, where, man, the lag time was so low, I didn't even notice it. I just die a lot anytime anyway, so it doesn't matter. I mean, I could be just getting killed. But any investigations into those types of machines where I'm logging into like a massive multiplayer online where it was traced back to where it was a GeForce Now machine spun up or a Luna machine spun up. I haven't seen any of those. I really thought that there'd be more of that now, but I think people are just, maybe I was just a few years too early with it, because the machines, and the reason I don't go buy some crazy, outrageous, expensive Windows machine, the graphics card are insane, is because you got to replace them every year, roughly, every few months. And with GeForce Now, I don't have to do that. GeForce, NVIDIA does that for me. I don't have to mess.
Yeah, I think this is what I brought up the last time when we talked about it, but if they can master the latency issue and they can make it a seamless experience, I think that makes sense. Because if I could, I mean, I have a PlayStation 5. I don't do much PC gaming anymore, but just because, like you said, nowadays I'm just like, PCs are just too much of a hassle to build gaming PCs now. If it was like a hobby, I'd do it, but sometimes I just, I play once or twice a week. I don't really feel like dropping $3,000 on a perfect gaming rig just to replace it in a year. But I think if they can master the latency and make it towards a seamless experience, I would definitely do that. I would take advantage of that for sure. Because the other problem is like, I feel like consoles, I mean, they just feel like such an outdated concept too, right? Like, I'm going to go buy a gaming console like in 2024 to plug into the RCA port on my computer, my CRT. It just feels like it's a concept from the 90s,
Right.
And it just feels like it's due it's just waiting for someone to disrupt that process. You know what I mean? For
Yeah.
someone to way to disrupt it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think I'm just way too far ahead that there hasn't been much adoption of that. Yeah, but if you guys haven't checked it out and you're gamers, I highly just check it out. I mean, they have a free version of the GeForce Now to test it, and then I upgraded because the experience was really good. And I have a Steam account, so it linked right to my Steam account, which allowed, obviously, the games I purchased on Steam to be pushed up to GeForce Now. So, yeah, I mean, finding the data, right? Especially if you're, especially when you're dealing with a groomer or predator type scenario in games, which is the typical type of crime you deal with there, or some type of fraud, then, that none of that had to be dealt with as of yet, but it'll get there at some point.
I think they should I'm surprised that TV manufacturers, I mean, I guess I do understand because it makes them more expensive, but I mean, it just seems like if I were a TV manufacturer, I would be looking into standardizing some kind of adding a functionality to my TV to where it has some sort of standardized gaming hardware, right? Where it's like, hey, we're Sony, and this is our Sony line of televisions that have gaming hardware built into the television, to where through the smart TV interface, you just download games like it's like a piece like Steam, or like, the way Steam has it set up on PC, but you just do it through your TV and you just plug in, you buy a Xbox controller or PlayStation controller and just plug it in, sync it to your television, and it's just a seamless experience. And you get either the sort of streaming process that you're talking about, or you just get the same process you get in a console, where you download a game and it runs locally, but it uses internet to store and share data or whatever. And then suddenly you have this seamless experience where you just pay a couple $100 extra for the television to have the gaming capability. And then you introduce that to game developers, and you build sort of a universal gaming platform where it's easier for, if you're a developer that you're making something for Xbox and PlayStation, then you can also make an additional build for the Sony gaming platform or the LG gaming platform or whatever.
Yeah. Now on that, I know Roku, that's a great idea. Sony is going to take your idea and run with it. They have PlayStation already.
Hopefully they do. I'd fully support that.
They're absolutely going to. Why wouldn't they? The streaming platform, because they already have some streaming capabilities. Yeah. But
we don't know they're not going to make any blockbuster movies anytime soon, because their movies always suck. So they need a different avenue to generate revenue.
Right. And I know Roku has like some smaller games. Like I think they license a version of Pac-Man to put on some of their TVs now, where it's essentially streaming a game of Pac-Man. But I would say the technology's there, because what GeForce Now is doing, the requirements for the actual computer aren't much, right? Yeah. Because I'm streaming everything. Everything's happening off my deck. Why couldn't they do a TV? Right. That's going to put an interesting twist on investigations.
I think the problem comes down with the only problem with the streaming with gaming, it doesn't necessarily affect all games, but you do have a little bit of a latency issue.
Yeah.
Where, no matter what game you're playing, there's going to be a 5-second latency, right? And that can be a problem depending on the type of game you're playing. So these sort of first-person shooter games, like Call of Duty or Counter-Strike, or whatever, gamers just aren't going to put up with that. It's not going to put up with any kind of latency at all.
Yeah, milliseconds matter in those types of games. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's a little bit of a disadvantage on that. But if you're playing like a single-player game where you're the only person and it's just a campaign-level story game or something, the latency doesn't matter as much.
Yeah, it doesn't matter at all. But man, I'm looking at the time here, and I want to get to your last one yet, which we've really kind of talked about it, and it kind of even just, it can fold back over to the AI piece, is the increased legal restrictions to get access to certain pieces of data. Right now, it's pretty lax. Of course, I haven't had to serve paper in a long time, so I'm not sure what major challenges law enforcement specifically, but I know it's always been challenging on the private sector to get
Yeah.
access to certain pieces of data. But
I
what's been your view on this year?
I know that I mean, it's interesting because it's like the legal restrictions haven't really changed, but what has changed is sort of what we're seeing an increasing change in perspective on is what data these vendors are allowed to even store in the first place, right?
Hmm.
So while our access to that data through legal means or otherwise may be the same, the amount of data being stored is probably going to decrease over time. Where you have, like the EU and the UK and other governments, even the US, are starting to increase privacy regulations on, telling software companies, hey, you can't just store any data that you want. You have to have some kind of framework around what data are you storing, how long are you storing it, what's your retention period. And then depending on the data, you could have situations where the government sort of says, hey, you have to store this kind of data for at least this period of time. And then in other cases, the government may say, no, you can't store any of this data, period. Like you're just not allowed to store it. Right. So you may have sort of a changing landscape in what data we even are capable of getting from these providers because, the regulatory environment may just dictate what the data actually is that they're storing. You could have a future where some of these software vendors, a government regulation could come down that says you can store the data, but it has to all be anonymized. It has to be anonymized through tokens where you don't know whose data is whose. It's all just done through an anonymous token that you don't have control over. And what does that mean? That means then, there's no way for the vendor to even know if you request data I want data from this so-and-so person. It's like they may not even, there could be a future where they don't even know how to they have the data, but they don't even know how to give it to you because they don't know how to, they've lost the ability to reverse engineer who it's connected to. Right. So I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying those are things that you could see in the future where, there could be encryption standards put in place by government regulation. There could be data storage regulations put in place where it just makes it harder, where we have the legal authority to get it, but once we try to get it, the data could just be in a format or live in a way where there's nothing we can do with it. So there's lots of stuff like that I can see happening where I haven't personally heard or seen too many new legal restrictions happening on data sets yet. So my original prediction may not necessarily be accurate, but we're seeing a different form of it in sort of how data regulation is sort of occurring across the industry.
Yeah, and I see some, again, going back to the AI piece and data restrictions and data access specifically is, obviously search warrants are supposed to have a specific scope, right? And limitations to what someone's looking for. And I think if AI advances within that, it's going to have to be aware of that scope. Because if law enforcement or government starts looking for something or asking questions and AI goes off track a little bit, saying that, this is here, it's out of the scope of the realm of the original search, then there could be some pretty big issues there, of whether that can be brought in or not, or at what point they stopped with that. AI is a whole new consideration when it comes to that as well.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, we have that problem in civil litigation already, where law enforcement is kind of spoiled in this area,
Oh yeah.
where they just get whatever they want as long as the
Yeah.
judge gives the warrant, right? In civil litigation, it's not like that. Like the judge acts as a mediator more or less between the two parties negotiating what data should be shared. So one party doesn't necessarily always have authority over the other on what data they get to see. But what that just means is that we have to go through these complicated processes of, okay, here's how we have decided to share this information. So someone like me or any of the people watching this podcast will have to have a process that they follow to segregate data that can be reviewed from data that can't be reviewed.
Right.
And the way I look at something like AI, like, yeah, AI, if AI is being used in that process, it has to have access to all of it, but that's no different than your e-discovery software having access to all of it. right? It's in some of these e-discovery platforms that exist have AI built into their systems already. It's just their own developed internal AI. But so I think from a law enforcement context, it's one of those things where I've always kind of waited to see when the other shoe will drop on that, in terms of like how long will law enforcement just kind of have carte blanche over this
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and how long will it take before it starts to merge with how civil litigation works, where there's a lot more, the parties negotiate a lot more over what data is accessed and viewed. I don't think it'll always be the same as in civil litigation, but I wouldn't be surprised at some point, just because of the amount of data that can be stored on a computer or a phone, where we see judges or some kind of regulation around, you know, managing the process that law enforcement uses to review the data, or not necessarily review it, but they might say, look, you can look at all the data you want, but the person who reviews it has to be separate from the person investigating the crime, right? And you have to have basically a taint team, basically, where, yeah, you designate a reviewer that can go through all the data and then provide the relevant bits to the investigative team. And then the rest of it doesn't get reviewed and they don't cross the streams. I could see something like that happening in the future, that it's just a framework to make it so that we have a better process for reviewing relevant evidence, as opposed to just, having full and complete access to any citizen that you want, that you just happen to be investigating, that sort of thing.
No, for sure. For sure. And with that, man, it's after 3:00 already. That hour went by quick.
Yeah.
So I want to sum up where we're at on our, and again, we'll have to catch up at the end of the year of where we're at on predictions, and hopefully before that, obviously, just chat about something else. But I say it's still yet to be seen. I don't want to say it's a failure yet. I'll admit, on the GeForce side, or GeForce Now, it's probably a colossal failure. But I'm gonna stay optimistic that there's going to be one person that investigates that.
I suspect
I win.
May have invested in that company or something.
I used to. Probably when I wrote the prediction. I think I sold right after that, not too long ago, NVIDIA stock. Just for the AI models alone, that's why I was invested, because they were going through the roof. And I always get in too late. I hear about something, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get this.
Anyway. It's when you hear about it, it's too late.
Yeah. Don't listen to me. Yeah, I guess watch the politicians. They're your best indicator of where they're investing money.
That's whatever they invest in, and you'll be good. Yeah.
Right. So Matt, thanks again for hanging out with us. I really appreciate it. We'll have you on another time. I want to utilize. I'm thinking about maybe doing a few hubcasts, like panels. I think you'd be great on a panel.
Yeah, let's get some spicy takes going. I like a good debate and arguments. I already saw some takes in the chats that I didn't say anything about, but I was like, man, don't get me started.
Yeah, lots of fun. That's why I thought panel. Let's get some people on there and rocking it. So hey, thanks, Cynthia. Appreciate you, man. Always good to see you inside of the Hubcast as well. And of course, the regulars that we have in here, Megan's always in here, Amber's in here, and there's a few others. Muhammad, I don't know that I've seen you on the Hubcast before. You probably have been. I'm scrolling through chat here real quick on my side where I can see some of it. Bob's actually been on the show before long ago. Some of the things that we're seeing in there, but again, yeah, we're going to argue. Megan says we're going to argue about console gaming. Yeah.
I have a console.
Megan's got a PS5 as well.
PS5. That's pretty much my entire gaming experience.
That's mine too. I have PS5. I say it's for my kids, but it's my account that's on it.
No, you're kidding me. Not the guy that has the Stormtrooper poster on the back. He's
not the guy with the kids. Whole background here, essentially. Yeah. All right, Matt. Hey, thanks for hanging out. Don't go anywhere, because outro is a little bit different than what we used to have to do before. So hang out. I'll be right back with you. Everyone else, thank you guys so much for hanging out. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next week for the next Hubcast. Take care. We'll see you. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Bye.